She had a blossoming career.
She was up for that big promotion.
She was on the fast track in the company.
With a love life to match.
The question of marriage had come up.
She kept striving and setting goals.
Until her life is cut short by a vicious attack.
Coworkers were absolutely shocked.
They heard the screams.
She's on the floor, bleeding out.
Detectives struggled to identify a suspect.
She was loved dearly.
She had a great relationship with people.
Who could have committed such a horrific crime?
But detectives will soon discover that this kind of evil lurks just beneath the surface.
They say, well, yeah, he's a real nice guy.
I help you.
Something was wrong. I felt it in my core.
He had created this other side of him.
This guy's really off his rocker.
Why did you kill him?
June 26, 2008. It's a busy Thursday lunch hour in Doraville, Georgia, a cosmopolitan suburb on Atlanta's sprawling perimeter.
Doraville is an older suburb outside of Atlanta, and it's a flourishing immigrant community.
On any given afternoon, you'll find people convening for lunch at their favorite ethnic restaurant.
But while most of their colleagues are out grabbing a quick bite, several employees at one local company have gathered inside their conference room.
They were having a lunch meeting at the office for a few of the employees.
It was a food processing lab that manufactured all types of additives for different types of food.
But they're only a few slides into the PowerPoint presentation when a piercing scream rings out.
Everyone takes off to see what's going on.
The scream came from Carrie Harris's office.
Carrie was the company's quality control manager, and she was one of the few people in the building at the time.
It wasn't unusual to see Carrie working through her lunch.
But no one in the office ever expected to see Carrie like this.
Oh my God, Carrie!
Originally from Memphis, 31-year-old Carrie was the youngest of 6.
We all loved her because she was everyone's best friend. She was one of those individuals from very early age that you knew was destined to do some amazing things with herself.
She always wanted to achieve more. And so she just kept striving and setting goals and expectations for herself. And she wasn't going to stop until she achieved them.
She graduated in the top percentage of her class, and she was pursued by many colleges all over the nation.
Carrie chose Alabama A&M, where she majored in food science.
Before she even went to college, knew that that's something that she wanted to do.
Carrie was always one of those people who was always intrigued by figuring out how things worked.
Carrie was a very picky eater. Once she read a package and realized what was in the package, she would not eat it. Because a lot of the stuff that she saw, she was like, who eats this?
Before organic was a thing, Carrie was organic.
And I think that drew her into the world of working as a food scientist.
After college, Carrie had her pick of jobs.
A lot of companies was getting in touch with her.
She would go on to land her dream job as a quality control specialist for a big agribusiness firm in Atlanta, Georgia.
But while the company was only a small part of a large multinational corporation, the division where she worked was more like a second family.
Everyone welcomed her to the company.
There was even a coworker who baked a cake welcoming Carrie to the office.
Wow, that's so nice of you.
I just wanted you to feel at home.
Her work ethic also quickly earned her respect around the office.
Carrie was well loved by her colleagues.
Thank you, Craig.
She was truly dedicated to her work.
She loved doing what she did.
Everyone could see that she was on the fast track in the company.
But Carrie's professional life wasn't the only thing taking off. She had also found love with a man named Max McCullough.
He was actually a person that she knew from college. They just end up through other mutual friends reconnecting in Atlanta. She felt like it was a good match. And I thought that he was a good person for her.
But which would make it to the next level first? Carrie's career or her relationship with Max?
The question of marriage and is that something you're interested in had come up.
But her main focus was on pursuing her master's.
Her plan was to get a master's while she was still working.
After she completed her master's degree, she was up for that big promotion.
She was about ready to take over North America for her company, for the quality control.
So she would be traveling a lot. We're talking U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
She was living her dream.
But now that dream has become a nightmare.
Carrie's coworkers were absolutely shocked to find her on the floor, bleeding out with a knife in her neck.
Carrie's horrified coworkers quickly call 911 to get help.
Police and EMTs are on the scene in minutes, but it's too late.
There was no reviving Carrie.
But now it's up to homicide detectives to uncover who was behind the deadly attack that cost Carrie her life.
As you can imagine, people are hysterical. They're shocked.
No one had actually seen what happened.
None of Carrie's coworkers can describe the appearance of the suspect.
But what Carrie's coworkers do tell detectives raises an immediate red flag.
Well, there's been some strange things going on lately.
Carrie started noticing weird things were happening.
She went to her office and noticed that many things had been moved around.
She had that feeling in the side of your neck that like somebody's watching you.
Carrie was starting to think that she might have a stalker.
"31-year-old Carrie Harris was on the verge of having it all.
Carrie had a lot of major things that were going on in her life. She had just finished off her master's degree. At work, she was up for a promotion because of the degree that she had finished off, and she was in a very serious relationship.
Things were going just as Carrie had planned.
But now, Carrie's coworkers have just made a horrifying discovery.
There were employees down the hall in a lunch meeting and suddenly heard blood-curdling screams.
They find Carrie's body on the floor, sprawled out with a knife in her neck.
Her coworkers immediately called 911, but when the EMTs arrived, they pronounced Carrie dead on the scene.
DeKalb County detectives arrived soon after responders to begin cataloging the evidence.
When the investigators enter Carrie's office, there are a couple of things that they notice. First of all, of course, they noticed the knife.
The knife was like a butcher knife from a kitchen. The knife was stuck in her neck very forcefully.
There doesn't seem to be any defensive wounds on her arms or her hands.
It was sudden. She didn't see it coming.
Detectives believe she may have been sending a fax.
Her back was turned towards the door when someone came in and stabbed her.
Detectives first consider the possibility that Carrie's killer could have wandered in off the street.
Being lunchtime, there weren't many employees at the office.
Carrie's office was near the front door.
But the vicious wound to Carrie's neck suggests her murder was personal.
Once that artery snapped in your neck, it's a wrap. You're going to bleed to death. That artery goes straight to your heart. So if you stab somebody there, you meant to stab them.
Who would hold such a grudge against someone like Carrie?
Detectives hope the murder weapon can give them a clue.
You're always going to check weapons for fingerprints, for DNA.
Leaving the CSI to collect the evidence, they turn to Carrie's coworkers.
Unfortunately, most of Carrie's coworkers had been out to lunch at the time the murder occurred.
A couple of colleagues were in a meeting.
They heard the screams.
But the people that were at the office during the attack didn't see the assailant.
None of them could imagine who would have wanted to hurt Carrie either.
She was well respected by her colleagues and was loved dearly.
My sister was always that person that was willing to give up herself to help others.
Carrie had a type of personality that would draw you into her. She would stimulate you through conversation.
However, coworkers also tell detectives she had seemed on edge lately.
What do you mean by on edge?
Well, there's been some strange things going on lately.
About a week before Carrie's murder, she went to her office and noticed that many things had been moved around.
That's so weird.
Carrie first thought it was the cleaning crew, but they hadn't even been in the night before to clean.
That alone wasn't too worrying, but according to her coworkers, more odd things started happening.
On her way home one night, she noticed that a car appeared to be following her. It wasn't until she decided to pull into a local police station that the car behind her decides to drive away.
The individual that was following her drove on and sped past, so she didn't get a good description.
Coworkers tell detectives that the incident had left Carrie rattled.
She actually started taking different routes home than her normal way that she would go.
Then, a few days later, another strange incident occurred.
When she was trying to leave work, her car wouldn't start.
What now?
Fortunately, one of her coworkers was around.
Looks like a cable came loose. That's all.
Oh.
She had a new battery that she had just recently had put in the car.
All right, try it now.
Oh, okay.
This was a pretty easy fix, but Carrie just couldn't shake the suspicion that someone had done this on purpose.
She started to wonder, did she maybe have a stalker?
Detectives thought if they could find Carrie's stalker, they probably were going to find who killed her.
But detectives are no closer to identifying them.
And this promotion, anyone have a problem with that?
Well, things had gotten a little awkward between Carrie and Glenn, her supervisor.
She was actually going to be in a position that was over her boss that she had already.
However, according to coworkers, her boss couldn't have done it.
Her boss at the time was in Kansas City doing this cross-company meetings where they were talking about products and product development.
However, one coworker says her boss wasn't the only one who took issue with her upcoming promotion.
Detectives learned that Carrie's boyfriend, Max, was not at all happy about an upcoming promotion that would send her around the world.
They had been getting pretty serious, and Max had been talking about the two of them settling down together.
A promotion would send her away from him.
Do you think this is what made Max angry?
Well, I don't know that I go that far.
Well, we appreciate your time.
Although now detectives wonder just how far he might have gone. After seeing a photo of Max and Carrie on her desk, detectives pull the building's security footage.
There's cameras all over the place.
But while there's no camera covering the door to Carrie's office, there is one at the entrance to her building.
Surveillance footage does show a male figure fleeing from the building immediately after the attack.
Since he's running out the door, the footage does not show a clear view of the man's face.
They noticed he did look pretty similar to Carrie's boyfriend, enough so that they kind of wondered maybe that was Max.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are over 400 workplace homicides each year nationwide. Of these, 25% are committed by a customer or coworker, while a victim's relative or domestic partner is responsible for 7%. Security cameras at Carrie Harris's workplace have captured what detectives believe to be her killer fleeing the scene after the murder.
The man seen in the video shared a similar build to Carrie's boyfriend, Max.
Later that afternoon, detectives bring Carrie's boyfriend in for a round of questioning.
I can't believe she's gone.
He appeared extremely distraught about her death.
We were talking about getting married.
She had just come back like a few weeks before that from a trip to San Diego with him, and she had definitely felt that was the direction that things were going.
However, as Carrie's coworkers suggested, the couple's relationship wasn't perfect.
Max admits to investigators that he wasn't thrilled about her promotion.
He said that even though he didn't like it, he had accepted it because he knew that it was good for her career.
Have you ever thought about it?
Not really.
You ever follow her? Sneak into her office?
Wait, what do you mean?
When detectives confront him about the man in the security footage, Max swears it isn't him.
Is that you?
He was at work in downtown Atlanta during the time of the murder.
That's not me.
Did you take a lunch break or something?
Yeah. I left at like noon. And I was back in like 20 minutes.
With Atlanta's crazy traffic, that would have meant there's no time for him to get to Doraville in time to commit the murder.
What's more, Max suggests that there's someone else detectives should look into.
He ends up telling detectives that Carrie would sometimes mention a guy at work acting pretty strange.
Okay, so what do you mean by strange?
I don't know. She just said that something wasn't right about him.
This guy have a name?
But I don't know. She just called him the Cake Man.
Detectives aren't entirely sure what to make of Max's story.
A nickname like Cake Man, it actually sounds pretty made up.
However, before looking into Max's claims and his alibi, detectives try to make contact with Carrie's family. Unable to get a hold of Carrie's mother, detectives leave a vague but troubling message.
My mom calls me up, freaking out. Says, hey, on the answer machine, detective from DeKalb County is calling left a message on there for us to call back. Something's happened. She's been in an accident.
Worried about his sister, Jason Harris makes the call.
Homicide Detective Brian.
Excuse me?
The guy told me it's just some homicide detective. And the moment he said that, I knew. And I was like, what? And he says, yeah, today your sister Carrie was attacked at work.
Oh my God.
After that, it just... I don't remember the next minutes that happened after that, or what I said or what I did.
Carrie's brother eventually recovers his composure.
I said it was Craig. And he paused for a minute.
This is the first time detectives are hearing the name Craig.
Craig? Craig who?
I don't know his last name. She just called him Cake Man.
Carrie's boyfriend hadn't known Craig's name, but her brother did.
She had told me about the cakes and the pies and that stuff.
That's not all Carrie had told her brother about Craig, though.
She thought he was sweet at first.
He was the nice guy that cared. He'd bring you soup if you were not feeling well. And just does like nice things like that for you.
He was good at his work. He got along with coworkers.
He would always be neatly dressed. He was always well-groomed. In fact, several of them had tried to set Craig up with friends of theirs, and a few of them had actually tried to set Craig up with Carrie.
Despite that, Carrie had made it clear to her coworkers that she wasn't interested.
She was dating someone.
But apparently, the message never got back to Craig.
We tried to ask her out to lunch or something, and she declined. She said when it comes to work as a professional environment, she was never rude about it anyway.
According to Carrie's brother, Craig still didn't get the message.
Craig's advances toward Carrie never stopped. It wasn't one of those things where every single day he was at her office or sending her flowers, but there's definite spurts in which that happened.
At one point in time, he gave her a Palm Pilot. She asked him to stop. She was very clear with Craig that she was not interested in having a relationship with him.
Jason says that according to his sister, the gifts did stop, but not Craig's inappropriate behavior.
He would creep up to her door where you have that feeling in the side of your neck that like somebody's watching you, and she'd look up and she would see him there.
So when strange things started happening to Carrie at work, Jason says she suspected Craig.
Stuff being moved around her office, her being followed. It freaked her out.
And then there was the day her car wouldn't start.
Magically, Craig was there.
She couldn't help but wonder if he had something to do with it being disconnected in the first place.
It seems like he was setting himself up to be a hero.
Jason says Carrie had been reluctant to tell her coworkers about Craig's behavior.
She had made it clear that she wasn't interested in dating him. And even then, they were still kind of semi-encouraging. Well, you know, she don't want to. He's a nice guy.
It was as if nobody had seen the darker side of Craig, but Carrie did.
And soon after the incident with her car, Carrie acted on her suspicions.
She actually filed a complaint with Human Resources.
The Human Resources Department had taken her seriously.
They gave Craig the directive, like, unless there's something happening in your building or you directly need to come over and deliver something to Carrie, you don't need to be in this building.
She didn't feel like she was in any imminent danger.
But had Carrie actually been in far greater danger than anyone imagined?
I felt it in my core. Craig was the person who had done it.
Detectives investigating the murder of Carrie Harris, a manager, filed a complaint with Human Resources about her coworker, Craig Armstead.
She went to HR about it and told him, that this made her feel uncomfortable.
Carrie Harris did everything that she could the right way.
When detectives meet with the company's human resource manager the next morning, she confirms that Carrie had filed the complaint.
They asked him not to have direct contact with Carrie, and if he needed to do so, to only email her.
These workplaces, they're pretty strict on sexual harassment, so I think she felt all right.
However, Human Resources reveals that Carrie had recently filed a new complaint.
The day before she was murdered at work, she found a camcorder in the women's restroom.
She noticed a dim red light shining from inside a basket filled with feminine products on the vanity.
She opened it up and saw the camera. It was planned in a way to where someone was actively watching women go to the restroom.
It was actually discovered because the battery failed in the camera, which caused a red light to flash.
But while Carrie found the camera the day before she died, she didn't file the complaint until the morning of her murder.
She found it right before 5 p.m., and at that point, it was just too late to contact Human Resources.
The next morning, Carrie heads to HR to make a formal complaint. She takes the pouch with the camera that she found and submitted everything.
Less than an hour later, Carrie was dead.
Investigators think this is far from a coincidence.
According to Carrie's initial HR complaint, Craig had been sneaking around and spying on her.
But does that mean he was the one who planted the camera?
Who had access to that bathroom? You got the office cleaning guys that come in at night. You don't know who put that camera in there.
Suspecting it's most likely Craig, detectives decide to pull his criminal record.
They wondered if he had had any troubling charges in the past.
He actually had committed other crimes where he was a peeping Tom.
They also learned that Craig had killed before.
The incident happened 20 years ago in New Jersey.
The young woman that he was dating at the time broke up with him.
Craig was not very happy about that.
He followed her home from work, beat her to death with a hammer, and then buried her body in a shallow grave.
Despite the brutality of the crime, the defense was able to secure a deal, and Craig pled guilty to manslaughter.
He received a 10-year sentence, but only served 5 years.
He was young, 16 or 17, and they don't like giving teenagers life.
In addition to that, there was concern at the time of Craig's mental health state. It is our belief that those two factors contributed to Craig receiving a reduced sentence in that case.
After Craig's release, he'd relocated to Atlanta.
People are wondering, why is this killer walking around and getting jobs? When you run a criminal history, an employee only can get so much, especially if that record been expunged.
He was a juvenile when he committed the crime, so it did not follow him. He was able to start a brand new life.
One where no one suspected he was a killer.
Craig was actually liked by his colleagues and his coworkers, seen as good at his job, and seen as a kind, intelligent individual.
But now detectives are wondering, had this seemingly kind and intelligent individual killed again?
He becomes the prime suspect.
After uncovering Craig's criminal record, detectives head back to the food processing company, only to discover that Craig hadn't come into work that morning.
The police put out what is called a bolo, be on the lookout, for Craig Armstead's car.
They also request additional surveillance footage, this time focusing on Carrie and Craig's movements in the hours before the murder.
One of the first things they were able to see was Carrie actually carrying a bag with the camera in it a little after 9 o'clock. And she was heading from her building over to the Human Resources Department.
And the HR was in the same building that Craig's in.
Craig even appears in the security footage soon after Carrie enters the building.
The video of the facility, it showed him walking past her and seeing her with the bag.
This leads investigators to believe that this is the moment that Craig realized that his camera had been discovered.
And the surveillance footage leaves little doubt about what he did in response.
It's just unbelievable.
A few minutes after Carrie walked back over to the building, Craig followed.
The cameras actually picked up Craig entering the break room.
Moments later, he's walking out with a knife in his hand.
Detectives investigating the murder of Carrie Harris have just uncovered surveillance footage that shows the minutes leading up to her brutal stabbing.
Craig is seen walking into the break room. A few moments later, he's seen walking out with a knife in his hand.
The knife that you see in the video is similar to the knife that was ultimately used to kill Carrie.
Combined with Carrie's complaints to Human Resources about Craig's harassment, there was more than enough evidence to justify an arrest warrant.
The authorities won't have to look very far for him either. At around the same time, patrol officers pull over Craig's car less than a mile from the office.
The police recognized they had a bolo for this vehicle.
Listen. This guy jumps out and sits down on a curb and starts saying, "I'm the one y'all looking for."
Craig immediately confessed to having killed someone. He did not name Carrie, but said that he had killed someone.
That's his mental state at the time. He was out of it.
Once at the station, detectives take their time to gain the suspect's trust.
They don't have to talk to you. So when he came to the interview room, and I wanted to make him as comfortable as possible.
I'm scared. What are you scared of? What are you scared of? I'm scared somebody's gonna hurt you. What are you scared of? I'm scared nobody hurt somebody.
Craig seemed to be really confused about who he hurt.
He tells detectives that he killed a man named Bill, who was his boss.
He was all over the place. He thought he stabbed the manager, Bill. Come find out that Bill wasn't even there. The guy called in sick.
Detectives keep pressing. Detectives keep pressing, hoping Craig will eventually confess to Carrie's murder.
It's in Jersey.
Detectives already knew about the previous manslaughter charge in New Jersey, but they were pretty surprised when he walked in and just so readily admitted to everything.
You remember who it was that you killed? Maybe it was my ex-girlfriend. Your ex-girlfriend in Jersey? Yeah.
I'm not a doctor or psychiatrist, but I interviewed thousands of people, and this guy got some mental issues going on big time.
Was that the first time you had the urge to kill somebody? No, thanks.
Craig tells detectives he's tried everything to control his violent urges.
I did good things. I would do good things for people. I would bake cakes. I would bake cakes. I would bake cakes for people. And I would bring it to them. I do it for free. I just bake cakes for free. It made me feel good.
According to Craig, there was just one thing that kept the lid on his violent tendencies.
He tells investigators how the only thing that really worked was being a peeping Tom.
Craig said he knew it was wrong, but he had to stop himself from hurting people.
I want this camera because it's the only thing that makes me not want to hurt anybody. Okay. And I said, I'll do this. I won't hurt anybody. I won't hurt anybody, but I'll do this. This is not so bad. Okay. What do you do with the camera? I put it in the ladies' room.
The women in the office kept a basket in the bathroom.
They would bring tampons and pads, and they would keep them in the restroom, which is where the pervert put his pouch. And he kind of cut a hole in the bag so that the lens could pick up what was going on.
And I would come back in the evening and I would get it. And I would take it home. I would look at it. Okay. What's still photo, video? The video. And that helped.
But according to Craig, that wasn't enough to stop him from killing Bill.
Craig claimed that Bill constantly teased him about a coworker.
He kept making comments about me and this woman on my job. That me and her were together.
Detectives ask Craig the woman's name, but they already know the answer.
The girl he was talking about.
At that point, the detectives figured it was time to confront Craig with the truth.
Carrie's the one that's hurt. Bill is Carrie. Yeah.
Once detectives informed Craig that Carrie was dead, he lost it completely.
Carrie piss you off?
Despite the apparent breakdown, Craig refuses to fully acknowledge what he'd done.
It's so strange. No, it's not a dream. Craig is not a dream. I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to tell me why did she die? Why did you kill her?
What Craig says next introduces a strange new twist to the story.
He began talking about someone made me do it.
Well, tell me about it. What's the plan?
Craig says that he's another part of it.
Stalkers end up killing because they don't seem too much, now they want to touch. I think he had to be pushed to kill. You had to really piss him off to kill. But he's going to stalk you forever. You know, he's the guy that peek into your apartment and found out, hey, I got to go inside while she's sleeping and touch her. When you hear the word creep, And you try not to judge somebody, but he put the C in creep.
Questioned by detectives, Craig Armstead has more or less admitted to killing his coworker, Carrie Harris.
As a detective, you see killers all the time. You try not to pass judgment, but he did kill somebody.
Although during his confession, Craig blames the murder on an alter ego he calls Frank.
I don't know how to He stabbed her with a knife. A silver blade.
Craig says that Frank is just a part of him, that he doesn't know how he works, just that he's another part of Craig.
It's like I was just... It's like I was a puppet on the string. You know, it's like I couldn't...
It sounds crazy, but could it be true?
I thought he possibly had split personalities.
Or is Craig's story about Frank simply supposed to sound crazy?
Craig's supposed mental health issues were partly why he got away with killing the ex-girlfriend over 20 years ago.
Craig had some mental health issues. And because of that, Craig was given a significantly reduced sentence. And it was our belief that having committed that crime, having used that defense before, upon killing Carrie, Craig immediately started thinking insanity and immediately start crafting his defense, which is why he started talking about Frank.
At the end of the interview, Craig is booked on murder charges, an outcome that leaves many of his coworkers in disbelief.
They was devastated once they heard all that.
People liked him. Craig carried himself as a nice person.
But as Craig's coworkers and Carrie's family soon learned, it was all a facade.
This guy, in 1990, he took his ex-girlfriend and beat her to death with a hammer.
When I found out about Craig's past, everything clicked for me. I mean, he was like this crazy predator. He should have never been able to see the light of day again from that situation.
It was like they was given an opportunity to commit more crimes.
As the prosecutors predicted, Craig enters an insanity plea when the case goes to trial.
He did his best to look the part inside the courtroom.
He's just sitting there with his head down, rocking back and forth, making noises. It was unbelievable. Not one time did any coworker said they saw Craig sitting at his desk with his head down, rocking back and forth, making noises.
He calculated this out, and he had a plan on how he could get away with it again.
We were determined that he was not going to get away with murder the second time.
In their opening statement, the prosecution portrays Craig as a desperate man who knew he was about to be unmasked.
There is security footage from the business that shows Craig following Carrie. He is immediately aware that the camera has been found.
This causes Craig to panic.
The gig is up, so to speak.
According to the prosecutors, Craig had responded by carrying out the deadly attack on Carrie.
He saw an opportunity when Carrie was in her office and everybody was in a meeting.
He secured the murder weapon.
He got it from their office kitchen.
When he walked into that office, he intended to kill Carrie.
Her back was turned towards the door.
He stabbed her in the neck right then and there.
And he fled the scene, fully understanding what he had done.
The defense counters by claiming Craig was not in his right mind when he attacked Carrie.
They say that he suffered from intermittent psychosis, which basically says that when he was dealing with Carrie, he was in a wrong mindset and made him believe that Carrie was a bad person and she had to be eliminated immediately.
But the prosecution fires back, playing part of Craig's taped confession aloud in court.
What I'm doing, it was just my way of justifying the evil inside me.
Frank, from the beginning, we believed was Craig being a manipulator.
When the jury returns with their verdict, they roundly reject Craig's insanity defense.
Craig was convicted.
He and Frank is serving life.
The outcome is little comfort to Carrie's family.
He took and stole a light that was there for the world, for good, for making things better for everybody.
Our sister's in the ground, but you still living, you still breathing. In my mind, he got away free.
And while nothing can bring back Carrie, her family hopes her story will save others from the same fate.
Corporations, train your people. Teach them the true definitions of what harassment is.
Don't be afraid to say, I'm concerned about this person. Don't be so concerned about how they're going to feel. Do something.
Do everything that you can to protect yourself and each other from the Craig Armsteads of the world.
Call the police. That's our job. You don't inconvenience us. We want that stalker, so he won't hurt nobody.
Thought in the lobby, clutching their investment certificates like prayer beads. In April 1996, Tresh and staff accountants requested a meeting with Kratz and Grabinski. The numbers don't add up, Bill, Tresh said, his voice trembling slightly. Allo is a black hole. We're telling people we're profitable while we're hemorrhaging cash. This isn't stewardship. It's fraud. Kratz didn't flinch. He sat behind his mahogany desk, his hands folded as if in prayer. Kyle, you lack the long-term perspective. These properties will mature. You're looking at a snapshot. I'm looking at the album. Have faith. Faith doesn't balance a ledger, Bill, Tresh replied. He resigned that week. In his letter, he used the word fraud 4 times. He expected the board to react. He expected a scandal. Instead, there was silence. The machine kept grinding. The salesman kept visiting nursing homes. And Bill Kratz kept singing hymns. Book 2, The Deadly Practice. Chapter 4, The Doctor with the Golden Touch. In Chicago, the air was thicker, smelling of exhaust and Lake Michigan salt. Dr. Ronald Michaels was a man who understood the value of a first impression. He was a podiatrist, but to his patients, he was a friend. He didn't just clip toenails or treat bunions. He brought sandwiches. He drank tea with 80-year-old widows in their cramped apartments. He listened to their stories about grandchildren and old wars. You're a saint, doctor, one patient told him as he finished a routine checkup. Michael smiled, a warm practiced expression. I just care about your mobility, Mrs. Gable. At your age, your feet are your freedom. But when Michaels returned to his office, the saint vanished. He sat at his computer, his fingers flying over the keys as he entered billing codes for Medicare. On the screen, Mrs. Gable hadn't just had her nails trimmed. She had undergone 3 complex foot surgeries. According to Micah's records, he was performing hundreds of surgeries a month. Sometimes he billed for 5 surgeries on the same patient in a single week. It was impossible. It was glaring fraud, as investigators would later call it. But to the Medicare system, it was just another set of digital entries. By 1998, Lycos was the highest paid podiatrist in Illinois. He was pulling in over $400,000 a year. He had the big house in Lincolnwood, the luxury cars, the status. But greed is a hungry beast. The more it eats, the more it needs. And Michaels was starting to starve. Chapter 5, The Star Witness. Joyce Brannon was 54 years old, a former ICU nurse who had seen the best and worst of humanity. She lived in the basement of the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church, where she worked as a caretaker. It was a humble life, but it was an honest one. She was one of Micah's patients. For months, she had noticed the explanation of benefits forms from Medicare arriving in her mail. She was a nurse. She knew how to read them. 70 surgeries. She whispered, looking at a recent statement. I haven't had a single incision. When investigators Pete Tyler and Renee Reyes knocked on her door in September 2001, Joyce didn't hesitate. Honey, I know what a foot surgery is, she told Renee, her voice firm. I've spent half my life in operating rooms. Dr. Michaels hasn't done anything to me but trim my nails. He's stealing from the government, and he's using my name to do it. She was the perfect witness. She was alert, professional, and incorruptible. But Michaels knew she was talking. He had been tracking the investigation with the precision of a hunter. He had a Palm Pilot filled with notes on every patient the feds had visited. Next to Joyce Brannon's name, he had written, interview went poorly. The walls were closing in. Michael's Medicare payments had been suspended. His wife had left him. He was living out of his car, the saint now a ghost of a man haunted by debt and the fear of a prison cell. He called Joyce. He pleaded, "I have a family. Joyce, don't you care what happens to me?" Joyce Brannon, the woman of faith, gave him the only answer she could. "You should have thought about that before you did this. Ronald, this is wrong." It was her death warrant. Chapter 6, Silence in the Basement. Sunday, January 27th, 2002. The church was quiet after the morning service. Joyce Brannon sat in her basement apartment, perhaps reading a book or preparing for her grand jury testimony scheduled for the following Monday. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the footsteps of the man who knew the layout of the church as well as she did. She was found in a sitting position, facing the window. She had been shot 6 times with a .22 caliber revolver. One shot was point blank to the head. There was no struggle, no robbery, just a cold, calculated execution to silence a voice that refused to lie. The routine white-collar case had just turned into a murder investigation. Book 3, The Harvest of Lies. Chapter 7, The Dust Settles in Phoenix. Back in Arizona, the mirage had finally evaporated. In August 1999, the state forced the Baptist Foundation to stop selling investments. 3 months later, it collapsed into the largest nonprofit bankruptcy in U.S. history. Nearly $600 million was gone. Bill Anderson sat in his garage, the same garage where he had once felt so secure. He was 80 now. He had suffered to heart attacks in the wake of the collapse. He was working as a handyman, carving wooden ornaments to sell for grocery money. Pat was working as a caretaker for people younger than herself. How could they use the church? Bill, she asked one evening, her voice trembling. How could they use God to steal our lives? Bill didn't have an answer. He just kept carving. In 2005, Bill Kratz and Tom Verbinski finally stood trial. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like elderly businessmen, slightly confused by the fuss. Their defense was audacious. If the state hadn't shut us down, the real estate market would have recovered and everyone would have been paid. The state killed the foundation, not us. The jury wasn't buying it. Kratz was sentenced to 8 years, Grabinski to 6. But for the 11,000 investors, the justice was a cold comfort. They recovered about 70 cents on the dollar, mostly thanks to a settlement from Arthur Anderson, the firm that had turned a blind eye for so long. The money was partially returned, but the faith was gone forever. Chapter 8, The Smoking Gun. In Chicago, the feds were working on a different kind of puzzle. They had the fraud, the paperwork was undeniable. But they needed to tie Maikos to the trigger. They found his storage locker. Inside was a cache of weapons, but not the .22. Then they found the note in his car. A handwritten schedule of the Sunday services at Joyce Brannon's church. They found the shell casing, a .22 caliber, matching the bullets in Joyce's body. They found the box of ammunition partially used. And finally, they found the timeline. 3 days before the murder, Maikos had retrieved his confiscated guns, including a .22 revolver from the Skokie Police Department after renewing his license. On May 5th, 2005, Dr. Ronald Maikos was convicted of health care fraud and the murder of Joyce Brannon. The healer was sentenced to death. Epilogue: The Cost of the Truth. The stories of the desert and the city converge in a single painful truth. Greed is a predatory animal. It finds the places where we are most vulnerable, our faith in God, our trust in our doctors, and it builds its nest there. Bill Anderson passed away with a heart heavy from the betrayal of his church. Joyce Brannon died because she believed that the truth was worth more than her life. In the end, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona and Dr. Ronald Maikos left behind a legacy of ruin, but they also left behind a reminder that even in the shadow of the most righteous institutions, one must watch the hands of the men in charge. For when they say they are doing God's work, they might just be building an altar to themselves. The end. The altar of greed. A novelization of faith, fraud, and fatal betrayal. Prologue: the mirage of righteousness. The Arizona sun was a relentless judge, baking the Phoenix asphalt until the horizon shimmered with the heat of 1,000 unsaid prayers. In this desert, water was life, but faith was the currency. For the thousands who gathered under the steeples of the Southern Baptist Church, the world was simple. There was the path of the righteous, and there was the wilderness. Bill Kratz understood this better than anyone. He didn't just walk the path. He paved it with gold, or at least the promise of it. To the elderly couples in the pews, Bill was more than an attorney. He was a financial Moses, leading them to a land of milk, honey, and 10% interest rates. They called it stewardship. It was a holy word, a word that bridged the gap between the kingdom of God and the security of a retirement account. But beneath the polished mahogany of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona's headquarters, a different kind of ritual was taking place. It wasn't a prayer meeting. It was a funeral for the truth. Part I, the foundation of sand. Chapter 1, the shepherd and his flock. Bill Anderson sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the Superstition Mountains in hues of bruised purple and gold. Beside him, his wife Pat gripped his hand. Her grip was a little tighter these days, a lingering reflex from the terror of the brain aneurysm that had nearly taken her 3 years prior. "We're safe now, Bill," she whispered. "The Lord provided." Bill nodded. He was a retired plant manager, a man who measured his life in honest sweat and mechanical precision. He had spent 40 years making things work. Now, in the twilight of his life, he wanted things to stay working. They had invested everything, $200,000 into the Baptist Foundation of Arizona BFA. It wasn't just a bank. It was an extension of their baptism. The brochures spoke of low-income housing, of feeding the hungry, of building the kingdom, and the interest, 10%. While the world offered 6, the BFA offered the blessings of a higher power. Its wise stewardship, the salesman had told them. He was a young man with a Bible in one hand and a ledger in the other. He spoke in verses and smiled with the practiced warmth of a grandson. You're not just saving for yourselves. You're investing in the gospel. How could they refuse? To doubt the BFA was to doubt the church. To doubt Bill Kratz was to doubt the very man who walked into their congregations like a modern-day apostle. Across town, Robert Shaw was fighting a different kind of desert. A former car salesman, Robert had spent his 30s in a haze of bourbon and regret. He had found the bottom of many bottles before he found the doors of the Southern Baptist Church. I was a wreck. Robert would later tell anyone who asked. The drink had its teeth in me. But the church, they took me in. They made my life easy again. For Robert, the BFA was his penance and his peace. He put $250,000 into the fund. Every penny he'd earned from every car he'd ever sold. He even set aside $60,000 for his daughter's education. He saw it as a fortress. He didn't know that the fortress was built on a sinkhole. Chapter 2. The Architect of Shadows. William Kratz was a man of impeccable tailoring and even more impeccable timing. At 34, he had taken the reins of a modest nonprofit and transformed it into a magnificent money machine for God. He sat in his posh Phoenix office, surrounded by the trappings of success that were meant to reflect the glory of the Creator. To Kratz, there was no conflict between a high-rise office and a humble heart. In his mind, he was doing the Lord's work on a grand scale. He saw the burgeoning real estate market of the 1980s as a divine gift. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, he would quote, but the titles are held in escrow. But the Arizona real estate bubble didn't care about theology. When it burst in the early 90s, the BFAS assets didn't just decline, they evaporated. Raw land that was supposed to be worth millions became worthless scrub. Commercial property stood empty, ghosts in the heat. A normal man would have admitted defeat. A righteous man would have confessed. But Bill Kratz was an ambitious man. He couldn't let the Pope of the Southern Baptists be seen as a failure. He created Allo. Allo was the bad bank, a shadowy off-book entity where Kratz buried the corpses of his bad investments. It was a circular flow of money. The BFA would sell worthless land to Allo at inflated prices. Allo would pay for it with notes I owe us that were essentially paper promises backed by nothing. On the BFAS books, it looked like a profit. On the reality of the balance sheet, it was a cancer. As the debt grew, the lies had to grow. More investors were needed. The salesmen were sent back out. Their pitches more urgent. Their use of the word stewardship more frequent. They were fishing for souls, but they were catching life savings. Chapter 3, The Preacher's Son. Kyle Tresh arrived in Phoenix with a law degree and a heart full of idealism. The son of a preacher from Tulsa, Kyle wanted his career to mean something. Working for the BFA seemed like the ultimate synthesis of his skills and his soul. The morale was infectious. Kyle remembered. It felt like we were the good guys. But as he dug into the contracts, the legal language began to smell like rot. He saw the names. Allo, Benefactor B, the complex webs of subsidiaries. He saw the money moving in circles, never leaving the house, just changing clothes. In April 1996, Kyle couldn't stay silent. He sat across from Bill Kratz and Tom Grabinski, the in-house counsel. This isn't a strategy, Bill, Kyle said, his voice trembling but firm. It's a deception. You're telling people we're profitable when we're hemorrhaging. Allo is a ghost. Kratz didn't flinch. He leaned back, his eyes calm, almost pitying. You lack vision. Kyle, these are long-term assets. They need time to mature. This is a workout situation, not a fraud. We're keeping the balls in the air until the market returns. You're using new money to pay old debt, Kyle countered. That has a name. It's called faith. Grabinski snapped. Kyle Tresh walked out and handed in his resignation. He wrote a letter accusing them of fraud. But the BFA machine was too big. Kratz sent a letter to the investors dismissing the rumors as attacks from Satan, and the faithful believed him. They ignored the news. They prayed for Bill Kratz. They kept their money in the furnace. Chapter 4, The collapse. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, agonizing crumble. Terry Green Sterling, an investigative reporter for the Phoenix New Times, spent 6 months following the breadcrumbs. When her series hit the stands in 1998, the mirage finally began to flicker. They were tanking, Sterling said, and they were singing hymns while they did it. In August 1999, the state of Arizona stepped in. They didn't come with Bibles. They came with cease and desist orders. The BFA was forced to stop selling. Without new investors, the Ponzi scheme gasped its last breath. 3 months later, the bankruptcy filings were made. $600 million. That was the hole in the ground where the investors' dreams used to be. For Bill Anderson, the news came like a physical blow. He was 70 years old. He went out to his garage and stayed there for hours, his hands shaking as he carved patriotic lawn ornaments to sell for grocery money. I couldn't sleep, Bill said. I felt like I'd failed Pat. I felt like I'd failed God. 2 weeks later, Bill's heart gave out. Then it happened again. To heart attacks in 14 days. The stress of losing $200,000 was literally tearing his chest apart. Robert Shaw had to tell his daughter that her college fund was gone. He had to sell the house he'd worked so hard to keep. At an age when he should have been playing golf, Robert was washing cars at a rental agency, his hands chapped from the soap and the cold water, his heart heavy with a betrayal that no prayer could fix. I didn't tell my wife for 2 weeks, Robert whispered. I was too embarrassed. I trusted the Baptist, and the Baptist had robbed me blind. Part 2, The Doctor's Shadow. Chapter 5, The Angel of the Sick. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods and secrets. In the quiet streets, where the elderly lived in brick bungalows, Dr. Ronald Michaels was a legend. He was the podiatrist who still made house calls. Would you like a cup of tea, doctor? His patients would ask. They were women in their 80s, men who had fought in wars and worked in steel mills. They saw him as a friend. Dr. Michaels was charming. He had a sterling bedside manner and a way of making the lonely feel seen. He would sit at their kitchen tables, eat their cookies, and listen to their stories about grandchildren who never called. Then he would bill Medicare for surgeries he never performed. It was a brilliant, cruel efficiency. His patients were old, sick, and often suffered from dementia. They wouldn't remember if he'd performed a complex foot surgery or just clipped their toenails. To them, it was all the doctor's work. In 1 year alone, Ronald Michaels made over $400,000. He was the highest paid podiatrist in Illinois. Over 7 years, he took Medicare for $1.7 million. But greed is a hungry god. Chapter 6, The Spiral. Beneath the charisma, Ronald Michaels was a man in freefall. A messy divorce had stripped him of his stability. He had a persistent prescription drug problem that blurred the edges of his morality. He was drinking heavily. His cash flow, once a river, was being diverted by investigators. Pete Tyler, a Medicare investigator, had noticed the red flags. One patient had 350 surgeries. Tyler had asked, staring at the screen, "That's not a foot anymore. That's a science project." When Tyler suspended the payments, Michaels didn't panic. He grew desperate. He started writing scripts for his patients. "Tell them I made tiny incisions," he coached them. "Tell them you're satisfied. Tell them I'm a good man." Many of them complied. They loved him. They signed affidavits swearing to miracles that never happened. But one woman wouldn't sign. Chapter 7, The Star Witness. Joyce Brannon was 54 years old, a former ICU nurse who had seen enough of life to know when someone was selling her a lie. She lived in the basement of the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church, where she served as the caretaker. She was a woman of truth. When the FBI agents visited her in September 2001, Joyce didn't hesitate. She looked at the billing record 70 surgeries on her own feet. "Honey," she said to Agent Renee Reyes, "I'm a nurse. I know what a surgery looks like. He never touched me with a scalpel." Joyce became the centerpiece of the government's case. She was the star witness who couldn't be intimidated. Michaels called her. He pleaded. He cried. I have a family. Joyce, don't you care what happens to me? You should have thought about that before you did this. Ronald, she told him, this is wrong. It was a sentence of death, though she didn't know it yet. Chapter 8, Silence in the Sanctuary. On a Sunday evening, after the hymns had faded and the pews were empty, Joyce Brannon was in her basement apartment. She was sitting in a chair, perhaps looking out the window at the Chicago twilight. She never heard him come in. The killer was methodical. He knew the layout of the church. He knew where Joyce lived. He walked up behind her and fired 6 shots from a .22 caliber revolver. One was at point-blank range. When the news reached Assistant U.S. Attorney Sean Berkowitz the next morning, the room went cold. She was supposed to testify in 3 days. Berkowitz said, we didn't just lose a witness. We lost a hero. Chapter 9, the Palm Pilot and the Shell Casing. The investigation into Dr. Ronald Michaels shifted from white-collar fraud to cold-blooded murder. Michaels was living in his car. He had lost his house, his dog, his dignity. He was a shell of a man, fueled by alcohol and a desperate need to survive at any cost. The feds searched his car. They found a box of .22 caliber ammunition. They found a shell casing that matched the one found in the church basement. And then they found his Palm Pilot. It was a digital diary of a stalker. He had recorded every agent who visited his patients. He had rated the interviews. He had noted the Sunday service times for the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church. He had planned the murder with the same clinical precision he used to fabricate his surgical bills. Epilogue: the cost of coins. In September 2005, the two worlds of Arizona and Chicago converged in the halls of justice. Bill Kratz and Tom Grabinski were found guilty. Kratz was sentenced to 8 years, Grabinski to 6. They maintained their innocence to the end, claiming that if they hadn't been shut down, everyone would have been made whole. They were still selling the Mirage from a prison cell. The investors got back 70 cents on the dollar, thanks to a settlement with Arthur Anderson. But the 30 cents they lost wasn't just money. It was the years of extra work, the heart attacks, the lost faith. I won't go back to a Baptist church, Katie Moss said, her voice thin. They used the word of God to steal my life. In Chicago, Dr. Ronald Michaels received a different kind of sentence. For the fraud, 6 years. For the murder of Joyce Brannon, death. He sits now in a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, waiting for a finality that he once forced upon a woman in a church basement. Joyce Brannon died for the truth. Bill Anderson lived for it. And Bill Kratz, he's still waiting for the real estate market to turn around in his dreams. The desert heat remains. The steeples still rise toward the sky, and the line between faith and fraud remains as thin as a 10% promise. The end. The alchemy of ink. The rise and fall of the H to H38 empire. A novel based on the true account of Albert Talton. Prologue, The Specimen Vault. In the heart of Washington, D.C., there is a room that does not exist on any public map of the city. It is a place where history is measured in cotton, linen, and the scent of chemical ink. They call it the Specimen Vault. Behind several layers of biometric security and armed guards, the walls are lined with floor-to-ceiling steel drawers, each containing the shattered dreams of thousands of men who thought they could outsmart the United States Treasury. Kelly Harris, a forensic expert with eyes sharpened by decades of looking at things most people ignore, pulled open a heavy drawer. The air inside the room was climate controlled, preserving the evidence of a century of greed. Inside lay a $100 bill, pinned to a velvet backing. To the untrained eye, it was Benjamin Franklin staring back with his usual stoic wisdom. But to Kelly, it was a ghost. This one was different. She whispered, her voice echoing against the sterile walls. In the long history of counterfeiting, a crime as old as the nation itself, most forgeries were the work of master engravers or desperate men with offset presses that weighed tons. But this bill, part of the notorious H to H38 strain, was the product of a quiet revolution. It wasn't born in a high-tech lab or a foreign basement. It was born in a townhouse in Lawndale, California, birthed by a man who saw the American dream not as a goal to be earned, but as a code to be hacked. This is the story of Albert Talton, a man who turned hairspray into gold and newsprint into an empire, only to watch it all burn under the relentless gaze of the law. Chapter 1: The Engineer of Inglewood. Albert Talton was never a man of small ambitions. Growing up in Inglewood, California, in the late 70s and 80s, the air was often thick with the scent of jet fuel from wax, and the underlying tension of a neighborhood were making it usually meant surviving until Friday. Inglewood was a place of deep contrast tree-lined streets with well-kept lawns shadowed by the reputation of Inglewood, always up to no good. Albert was the outlier. While the other kids were looking for trouble on the street corners or joining the burgeoning gang culture of Los Angeles, Albert was in his garage, surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and the smell of solder. He had the hands of a surgeon and the mind of an electrical engineer. He didn't just play music. He wanted to understand why the bass from a Bose speaker felt like a physical heartbeat against the chest. One afternoon, his friend David Goldberg watched in awe as Albert disassembled a high-end Bose radio he had acquired. "What are you doing?" "Al, that's a $300 system," Goldberg said, leaning against the cluttered workbench. Albert didn't look up. His soldering iron hissed against a circuit board, a small plume of blue smoke rising into the air. "They're charging for the name." "Dave, I want to see the math. I want to know how they get that much air to move in such a small box. It's an acoustic waveguide. It's just geometry and physics. If I can replicate the geometry, I can replicate the sound." Within a week, Albert hadn't just fixed the speaker, he had replicated its internal waveguide using scrap plastic, wood, and his own calculations. He built a car stereo system from scratch that hit harder and cleaner than anything sold in a showroom. It was his first taste of the copycat high, the realization that with enough patience and attention to detail, the world's most expensive secrets were just puzzles waiting to be solved. But the legitimate path was slow and frustrating. After high school, Albert enrolled in electrical engineering courses, but the academic pace felt like a crawl. College was a grind of theories, debt, and professors who didn't understand his practical genius. He dropped out, his brilliance untethered from a degree. He began doing dirt, the local slang for the hustle. He realized that the same mind that could decode a Bose speaker could decode a financial document. He forged checks, a crime that landed him in a cell in the 90s. He committed bank fraud in 2001. Each time he went away, he didn't learn to stop. He learned how not to get caught next time. By 2004, Albert Talton was 41 years old, a two-time felon working at a body shop. He was a man with a Ferrari brain stuck in a Hyundai Life, sanding down fenders and mixing paint for customers who didn't know his name. Then came the spark. His boss at the body shop walked into the small, dusty office one morning, holding a $100 bill between two fingers as if it were a dead moth. "Look at this piece of junk,"